Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive into, something we all experience, time.
Mm,
Maybe you're listening while you're getting ready for work, or maybe you're just curious about, well, you know
yeah.
what? Time is really.
Yeah.
Whatever brought you here today, we're going to be exploring some pretty mind-bending ideas
Yeah.
about time.
It's true.
We've got sources from all over philosophy, science, even a little psychology.
That's right.
And they all point to the fact that time might not be exactly what we think it is.
It's true. We use time every day. We check our watches, we schedule appointments.
Right.
But when you actually kind of like stop and think about it,
Yeah.
what is time?
Right. It feels so basic,
It really does.
so fundamental.
Yeah.
But even defining it is, it's kind of slippery.
Yeah.
Like we've got clocks and calendars, sure,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have our own internal sense of time,
Right.
which can feel totally different from what the clock is telling us.
And that's exactly it. It's the difference between that objective time that's measured by those external tools
Yeah,
and that subjective time, our own personal experience of it,
it's true.
you know?
Like you always hear people say, time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly.
Oh, tell me about it.
Think about how time drags when you're bold.
It's like a work meeting that never ends,
Exactly.
but then like a whole vacation week just disappears in a flash.
It really does.
It's like our brains have a fast forward button for time.
Hmm. That's a good point.
So is time actually like out there, like a river just flowing along,
Hmm.
or is it all in our heads?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
There are philosophers who say that only this present moment actually exists.
Really?
Yeah. The past is gone. The future hasn't happened yet.
Wow.
And that's called presentism.
Presentism.
It's like you're walking on a tightrope,
Yeah.
and only this moment is real.
Okay, so that kind of makes me feel a little unsteady.
Yeah.
Like if I make the wrong decision right now,
Hmm.
that's it. No takebacks.
Yeah, it really challenges our understanding of how we make choices and what the consequences are.
Hmm.
But there's another view, too.
Okay.
It's called eternalism.
Eternalism.
And that's the idea that every moment in time, past, present, and future,
Okay.
they all exist equally.
So like instead of a tightrope, it's more like
Yeah. Yeah.
a giant block of time.
Yes, exactly. Picture a giant block of time, and we're experiencing just one tiny slice of it at a time.
Okay, so if all those moments are already out there,
Yeah.
does that mean our future is already like set?
Mm.
That's where this B theory of time comes in, right?
Yes, exactly. The B theory says that there's no real flow from past to future.
Hmm.
All moments are equally real.
Okay.
And this ties into that block universe theory.
Okay.
Imagine time as a film reel.
Okay.
All the scenes are there all at once, but we're only experiencing it
Right.
frame by frame.
So does that make our journey through time an illusion?
It might?
Okay, now my head is officially spinning.
Yeah.
Can we bring in like some science here to ground us a little bit?
Absolutely.
I know Einstein had some pretty interesting things to say about time.
He did.
And this isn't just like theoretical physics either.
Yeah,
This stuff affects us every day,
exactly.
like Einstein's theory of relativity.
Yeah, that really shook things up.
Yeah.
It shows that time isn't absolute.
Mm.
It's relative,
Okay.
meaning it can be warped.
Warped.
Yeah, by gravity and speed.
Okay, I think I've heard of this.
Picture it like the universe is this giant rubber sheet,
Okay.
and, massive objects like planets,
Yeah.
they create dips in it,
Mhm.
and those dips affect how time flows nearby.
So the closer you are to something massive, like a black hole,
Mm-hmm.
the slower time moves for you
Exactly.
compared to someone who's further away.
Precisely. And this isn't just sci-fi,
Yeah.
We see this with GPS.
Mm.
The satellites up there have to account for these tiny differences in time flow
Mm.
because of their altitude and speed. Otherwise, our navigation systems would be way off.
So Einstein's theories are literally built into our technology.
They are.
That's incredible.
It is.
But here's what really blows my mind.
Yeah.
Time dilation.
Mm.
You know that thought experiment with the twins?
Yes.
One stays on Earth, the other blasts off in a spaceship near the speed of light.
Yeah.
And when they come back, the space twin has barely aged.
The twin paradox.
Yeah.
It's a great way to illustrate how time can be stretched or compressed,
Okay.
depending on how fast you're moving relative to someone else.
And we're actually experiencing tiny bits of time dilation right now,
We are.
just from the Earth's gravity,
That's right.
compared to someone out in space.
Exactly.
It's not noticeable,
Yeah.
but it's happening.
It is.
So time is warped by the universe, but it's also warped by our own brains.
Yes.
Have you ever noticed like how a boring hour feels like it lasts forever?
Ugh, tell me about it.
But an hour of doing something you love just flies by.
That's because our brains are messing with us.
Really?
It's what we call psychological time.
Okay.
And it's influenced by our emotions, our memories, our attention.
Yeah.
When we're experiencing something new,
Yeah.
something exciting, our brains are taking in more information,
Hmm.
so it feels longer.
So you're telling me my brain is tricking me into thinking vacations are longer.
It might be,
I'm okay with that.
but it does explain why time seems to speed up as we get older, right?
Mhm.
We experience fewer new things, so our brains don't encode them as strongly.
So it's like our internal clock is ticking a little faster when we're on familiar ground.
That's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
But think about it this way.
Okay.
This means we can actually influence our experience of time.
So if I want time to slow down,
Hmm.
I need to go out and try new things,
Exactly.
break out of my routine.
Challenge your perceptions.
Okay.
Engage with the world in new ways.
Interesting.
That's one way to stretch out those minutes into
Yeah.
something more meaningful.
And speaking of different perspectives, what else plays a huge role in how we experience time?
Right.
Culture.
Ah, yes, of course.
Our sources talk about how some cultures see time as linear, like a straight line from past to future,
Yeah.
while others see it as cyclical, repeating in patterns.
And that shapes everything.
Nah.
How we plan our lives,
Right.
how we think about the past,
Yeah.
how we value the future.
So for some people, time is all about like deadlines and progress.
Yes.
And for others, it's about like the natural ebb and flow of life.
Exactly. It's a completely different way of understanding our place in the grand scheme of things. It's not just about clocks and calendars.
Yeah.
It's about how we make sense of life itself.
This is making time feel so much more personal.
Yeah.
Almost like a choose-your-own-adventure book.
I like that.
But if it's this subjective, this malleable,
Yeah.
what happens to those big questions about the nature of time itself?
That's where things get even more philosophical.
Okay.
If time is less rigid than we think,
Yeah.
does that change how we view our choices, our regrets, our hopes for the future? Does it change how we think about free will
Okay.
and what happens to time at the very beginning and end of the universe?
Oh, wow.
These are questions that have puzzled thinkers for centuries.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm officially hooked.
Me too.
We've gone from clocks and calendars to black holes and alternate realities in just a few minutes.
And we've only just scratched the surface. It's a journey, that's for sure. And the deeper we go, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that.
But that's also the beauty of it, isn't it?
Hmm.
This quest to understand time.
Yeah.
It's really a quest to understand, like, the universe
Yeah.
and ourselves.
It's like we think we have time figured out because we wear watches and use calendars.
Right.
But underneath all that is this just vast, mysterious ocean of like
Opinions.
concepts and theories.
Remember we were talking about presentism
Yeah.
earlier? Yeah. The idea that only the present moment is real?
Mm-hmm.
That leads to some interesting questions about, like, how we make decisions.
Yeah, like if the past is truly gone, does that mean our regrets are meaningless?
Mm-hmm.
And if the future hasn't happened yet, how much control do we really have over it?
It challenges our whole notion of responsibility.
Right.
Are we truly the authors of our own lives if only this moment exists?
Wow.
And then how do we plan for the future if it's not already set in stone?
Okay, I need a minute to process all of that.
Take your time.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
let's get back to this idea of eternalism for a second.
Okay.
That all moments exist at once.
Yes.
That one was really mind-blowing.
It is a powerful concept.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. If eternalism is true, then every moment of your life,
Okay.
every choice you've made, every possibility that you didn't pursue,
Yeah.
they're all out there existing simultaneously.
So like a parallel universe for every path I could have taken.
It's almost like that, yeah.
But if all those moments already exist, doesn't that mean free will is an illusion?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer. Some philosophers say that even if every moment exists,
Okay.
we still have the freedom to choose our path through them.
Okay.
It's like being given a map with all the possible routes marked out, you know?
Yeah.
But you still get to decide which one to take.
Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better.
Good.
But it also raises a new question.
Okay.
If we could see the whole map of time, would we even want to?
That's a good point.
Wouldn't it ruin the surprise?
Yeah.
The excitement of not knowing what's coming next.
There's definitely something to be said for that mystery, you know?
Yeah.
The unfolding of life's journey. Maybe knowing everything beforehand would take away from the experience.
It'd be like peeking at the ending of a book.
Exactly.
So we've got presentism and eternalism kind of battling it out.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other thinkers who've tackled this idea of time, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I know we can't talk about time without mentioning Immanuel Kant.
Of course he was a philosophical heavyweight.
Yeah.
Kant believed that time isn't actually a property of the world itself, but rather it's a way that our minds organize experience.
So time is kind of like the operating system our brains use to process reality.
That's a good analogy.
Okay.
Kant argued that time and space are fundamental categories of human understanding.
Okay.
We literally can't experience the world without them.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then you have someone like Isaac Newton, who saw time as like absolute,
Yes.
universal ticking away like a cosmic clock.
Exactly. For Newton, time was an unchanging backdrop against which all events unfolded. It was completely independent of human perception.
So who's right, Kant or Newton? Is time a fundamental part of the universe, or is it all in our heads?
That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and it's one that philosophers are still debating to this day.
I mean, we know from Einstein that time is relative. It can be warped by gravity and speed,
Exactly.
but we also know from our own experience that time is subjective.
Yes.
It can feel different depending on our mood, our focus, our culture.
So it seems like time is both a physical phenomenon and a psychological experience.
That's a lot to wrap my head around.
It is, but it's also what makes time so fascinating. It's not just a simple linear progression from past to future.
Yeah.
It's woven into the very fabric of reality, but it's also shaped by our own minds.
I love that.
Me too.
It means that time isn't just some external force dictating our lives.
Right.
We're active participants in how we experience it.
Exactly. And speaking of different experiences of time, remember we talked about how it seems to speed up as we get older?
Oh, yeah. Where did the year go? It's phenomenal. I remember summers feeling endless when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now they just whiz by.
There are some interesting theories about why that happens.
Oh, really?
One is that as we age, we have more memories,
Okay.
more experiences to draw on. Yeah.
So new events just become less novel, less surprising.
So it's like our brains are filling up and there's less room for new information to, like, make a big impact.
That's one way to think about it. Another theory is that it's related to how we perceive time in chunks.
Chunks.
You know, when you're young, a year is a huge percentage of your life.
Right.
So it feels like a really long time.
Yeah.
But as you get older, a year is a smaller and smaller fraction of your overall experience.
Okay.
So it just feels shorter.
That's actually kind of depressing.
It can feel that way.
It's like time is slipping through our fingers faster and faster as we age.
But it also highlights the importance of savoring each moment.
Yeah.
You know, being present, engaging with life fully. The more we pay attention to those details, the richer our experience of time becomes, regardless of how fast it seems to be moving.
That's a good reminder. It's not just about the quantity of time.
Right.
It's about the quality of how we experience it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to the question of free will.
If time isn't this rigid, linear track, does that give us more freedom to shape our own paths?
I like where you're going with this.
Yeah.
If we can, like, bend and stretch time with our minds, maybe we have more agency over our lives than we think.
It's possible.
But before we go too deep on that,
Yeah.
there's another concept from our sources that I've been dying to talk about.
Okay.
The arrow of time.
Oh, yes. The arrow of time.
This idea that time flows in one direction.
From past to future.
Yeah, and never the other way around.
Right.
But is that like a fundamental law of the universe? Or just a quirk of how we perceive things?
It's a great question.
It's like we're caught in this current, swept along from birth to death, and there's no way to reverse the flow.
But what if there are places in the universe where time behaves differently?
Ooh.
Now, that's where things get really speculative.
Yeah.
But it's something that physicists are actually grappling with.
Really?
The arrow of time is closely linked to this concept of entropy.
Entropy.
Which is basically the tendency for disorder to increase in a closed system.
So entropy is like a cosmic, messy room.
That's a good way to think about it.
Things tend to get more chaotic over time.
Exactly. Think about a dropped glass shattering.
Okay.
It's easy for it to break into a million pieces.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult for those pieces to spontaneously reassemble.
Right.
That's entropy in action. And for a long time, it was thought that the arrow of time was directly tied to this increase in entropy.
Okay.
But now some physicists think that maybe it's more complicated than that.
So there might be places where the arrow of time points in a different direction.
Hmm.
Or maybe even loops back on itself.
It's definitely in the realm of theoretical physics, but it's not entirely out of the question.
Like time travel might actually be possible.
There are some models of the universe that allow for something called closed time-like curves,
Okay.
which are essentially paths through space-time that could allow for time travel.
Whoa. That's some serious mind-bending stuff.
It is.
I'm not sure I understand it all.
Yeah.
But it definitely sparks the imagination.
It does, and it challenges us to question these assumptions we might not even realize we're making.
Like what?
Like, we just assume that time flows in one direction.
Right.
Cause always comes before effect.
Yeah.
But what if those are just limitations of our current understanding?
It's like we're looking at time through this tiny keyhole, and there's this whole vast panorama on the other side that we can't even comprehend yet.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And who knows what amazing discoveries await us as we continue to explore the mysteries of time.
Exactly.
But before we get too carried away with time travel and alternate realities,
Okay.
let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. Remember we were talking about how our culture influences our perception of time?
Oh, yeah, the linear versus cyclical time thing.
Exactly.
That really made me think about how much our upbringing shapes our relationship with time.
It's so important to recognize those cultural differences.
Yeah.
You know, for someone who grew up in a culture with a very linear view of time,
Yeah.
deadlines and schedules might feel like the natural order of things.
Right. Like time is a precious commodity.
Yes.
That you can't waste.
Exactly. But for someone from a culture with a more cyclical view,
Yeah.
time might feel less pressured, more about the natural rhythms of life.
It's not that one view is right and the other is wrong.
Right.
They're just different ways of making sense of the world.
Exactly. It's like we're all wearing these different time-tinted glasses, and we don't even realize it.
And I bet that leads to a lot of conflict and misunderstanding.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
Like imagine trying to collaborate on a project with someone who has a totally different sense of urgency about deadlines.
Oh, yeah. That'll be chaos.
It highlights the importance of cultural sensitivity
Absolutely.
and understanding.
If we can just recognize that there are these different ways of relating to time,
Yeah.
we can start to bridge those gaps and communicate more effectively.
I love that.
Me too.
Instead of trying to force everyone into the same time zone,
Right.
we can embrace the diversity of temporal perspectives
Exactly.
and maybe even learn something from each other in the process.
That's the beauty of cross-cultural exchange, you know?
Yeah.
It expands our horizons and challenges us to rethink our assumptions.
Speaking of assumptions, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room.
Oh, you mean the clock on the wall?
The big question that we've been dancing around this whole time.
Okay.
What is time, really?
After all this, do we have a clearer answer?
I don't know about a clearer answer, but my brain is definitely full.
Yeah.
We've covered so much.
We have.
From Einstein's relativity to psychological time to like cultural perspectives.
It's a lot.
Even the possibility of time travel.
Hmm.
But I guess if I had to sum it up, I'd say time is way more complex and mysterious than I ever imagined.
I think that's a great takeaway. We started with this simple question, what time?
Yeah.
And we ended up questioning, like, the very nature of reality itself. Maybe that's the point of a deep dive like this, you know?
Yeah.
To realize how much more there is to discover.
It's like we peeled back layer after layer,
Hmm.
and instead of finding this, like, neat, simple answer,
Yeah.
we just uncovered more questions.
Yeah.
More possibilities.
Exactly. And that sense of wonder, you know, that curiosity.
Yeah.
That's what keeps us exploring, keeps us learning. It's true. We may never fully grasp the true nature of time,
Right.
but the journey itself is incredibly valuable.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
But for our listeners who are still trying to, like, wrap their heads around all of this, what's, like, one key insight you would leave them with?
I would say this. If time is an illusion,
Okay.
or at least far more complex than we usually think it is,
Yeah.
then each moment becomes incredibly precious.
Hmm.
Whether we see time as linear or cyclical, objective or subjective, it's the only currency we truly have.
That's a good point.
How we choose to spend it, experience it, make meaning of it, that's up to us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, fellow time travelers, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
It's been a journey.
It has. I hope you're leaving with more questions than answers,
Me too.
because that's the hallmark of a truly mind-expanding exploration.
As always, we encourage you to keep pondering these ideas.
Yeah.
Check out the show notes for links to the sources that we discussed.
Yeah, we'll have some additional reading in there, too, if you're feeling extra curious.
And until next time, remember, time may be a mystery, but it's also a gift.
Yeah.
Make the most of it.
Yeah.